why is it that y'all don't like hearing about all the horrific things white people did during slavery and after slavery? Does it make you feel some sort of way? I just want to know.
All right, so in 1860, I want you to guess how many white individuals owned slaves. What percentage of white people in the US owned slaves? I'll give you 5 seconds. Across the entire white population in the US in 1860, 1.4% of individuals owned slaves.
That is such a loaded question because we can also reference right now in today and poll the Fortune 500 corporations and say how many of those CEOs are white men. Now, the fact that they're corporations entails thousands of people. So the fact that there is one white owner does not disregard the many minions that assisted in the rule of said 1% of white people that own slaves. A very disingenuous argument to start off with, because if we're going to run down the particular job that took place just because there were indigenous Americans that were enslaved ever since the 1500s. This created a lot of opportunity for overseers, for drivers, for patrol members, for slave breakers, for slave catchers, for bounty hunters, for people that worked at the jails, for slave traders, for people who operated ships, crew members on the ships. Then you had the government that made sure that the laws allowed slavery to continue and exist. The sheriffs all over the country, the clerks all over the country, the notaries, the lawyers, the legislators, the politicians. Most of these people was of caucasity, right? So even further, the auctioneers, the speculators, the slaves, you could put insurance on a slave at these slave auctions. So if you had enough slaves, you get loans and use your slaves as collateral. So if you didn't pay your loan back, they'll take your slave, things like that. But then also like policemen, they were birthed out of slavery. So just because there's 1.5% of white slave owners, that don't mean that there were thousands, if not millions, of people of a higher percentile that benefited directly from slavery. So that argument is null and void, in my opinion.
And I find this interesting because I rarely hear anybody talk about this. In other words, 98.5 to 98.6 out of every 100 white people did not own slaves.
But at the same time, they knew what was happening and they did nothing. So let's not act like if you see somebody that's a literal slave or a whole group of people that's literally slaves that's getting treated like property, and you just like, well, it ain't me, so it ain't none of my business. For hundreds of years, I feel like everybody in that particular time have some form of complicity in the matter of chattel slavery.
So, my question to many Black Americans is why do we continue to act like it was 100% of white people who owned slaves and all white people are responsible for it?
And that to me is a disingenuous statement because I think most people have some white people that they cool with. So of course nobody is saying all, but we are definitely saying some. And just because you throwing out statistics and facts, we're gonna disregard even if it was 0.8% of white people that own slaves, do we not bring them to some form of task? Is there not any form of repair that these 0.8% of white men need to do to those that were affected by chattel slavery in America?
You'll see many Black Americans that love to talk about this history and get all, and they don't want to tell you this and they don't want to tell you that, but these same people conveniently leave out that the vast people did not have slaves. On top of that, many Black Americans act like there was not a civil war fought over slavery.
The Civil War was not fought over slavery. Abraham Lincoln, out of his mouth, Let's read the quote, and you tell me if this dude cared about slavery. This is a famous quote. The president during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, specifically was said or quoted to say, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." Meaning that he didn't care about freeing slaves, if you're going to say that. We're talking about slaves being free. But up until the 1960s, there were still slaves in America. Juneteenth is a holiday in reference to people being free from slavery, but not knowing that they were free from slavery. So I bring all of this to the table to say this argument is not a strong argument, and and he need to do a lot of more research that's non-biased or unbiased, because there are literal scholars that specifically say that there were other and bigger reasons for the Union to um, go to war with the Confederate States of America. And mainly, it wasn't about slavery, because the factories in the North and the textile centers of the North were just like slavery. It just wasn't cotton. And when black people came to Ohio or Illinois, they wasn't treated like first class citizens. In Chicago, that is literally the birthplace of redlining. So let's not romanticize the North and vilify the South because we read some history books in school. That don't even make sense. Let's do our due diligence and study this at a very deep level to come to the succinct understanding that the Civil War had little to do with slavery.
The Civil War was fought over slavery, and over 300,000 male white Union soldiers died in this war. So
It wasn't like they was we have to black people. I'm willing to put my life on the line. It was allegiance to the state, not to ending slavery. They were not motivated. All of those soldiers, the government, not even the president, was motivated to free anybody. Because after that, you had the black codes, you had Jim Crow, you had redlining, you had the crack epidemic, specifically targeting black areas and cultures. Let's add in Black Wall Street, Rosewood. This was all after slavery.
in essence, there were whites who were fighting to keep us enslaved, and there were whites who were fighting to free us.
You said that only 1.5% of white males own slaves. So you're saying that all of those people were fighting for the Confederate soldiers too? Because they obviously didn't own slaves, because only a small percentage of white people, but they had a whole Confederate army. They didn't own slaves, but they were fighting to keep slaves that they didn't own. But you're also saying that you could be a white person and be aligned with slavery and not own slaves. So don't you think that could happen across the board? And so, if you're going to make a statistic in reference to white people in slavery, don't make your criteria be, well, if you own slaves, you are for slavery. And if you didn't own slaves, then you automatically were anti slavery. That would make sense.
But it seems like most Black Americans only tend to want to focus on the white Americans who wanted to enslave us. And they treat all white Americans as if they're part of that group, when the reality is clearly they're not and they weren't. Again, only like 1.4 to 1.5% of individuals in 1860.
You already said that. So repeating it don't make it that much. It's not amazing to me that white 1.5% of white people own slaves. If there are a million white people, there's thousands of white people owning hundreds and thousands of slaves. What is this dude? What type of crack is this dude smoking?
60 owned slaves. So again, my two questions as of right now would be, why are we acting like all white people owned slaves and supported people owning slaves? And the other question is, why do we act as if there was not a civil war fought by white people to free us from being slaves?
that I don't know. This dude got his history in the eighth grade and just ran with it. Like them textbooks they give you in the eighth grade, bro got an A in eighth grade history and said, I ain't gonna study no more. You know what I mean? This dude is off the Beelzebub.
It's like many of us focus on the side that was doing wrong and not the side that did right. And I think this is important clarity that's not talked about enough. Like too many of us around acting like this was something all white people were doing.
I mean, did you not see the pictures of the lynching when they had everybody out there and there'd just be a young man hanging and the whole town watching him hang? Like these mobs. It's always it's a literal called the lynch mob. This is after slavery. You know what I'm saying? Look up the nadir of race relations in the United States. The 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 most toxic period between black people and white people was not during slavery, it was post slavery. But we're not going to talk about that because that don't make I mean, bro definitely got a Becky at the crib trying to impress her, but it's like even she looking at him, bro, you don't gotta even vouching for me that much. Like it's cool. Have some pride in your race. Like study other sources. Expand your palette, my boy.
It wasn't. So acting like this was all white people is representing a skewed, inaccurate.
And once again, whether it's all white people or a few white people, the what we need to talk about is what happened, not the amount of white people that took part in it and the white people that just I ain't have nothing to do with it, pal. We're like, bro, that's not going to repair anything.
Version of history. And many Black Americans somewhat base some of their feelings of white people based off of this skewed, inaccurate representation.
If it's a white person that treats you good and y'all cool, you don't got a problem with it. But the racist shit, that's when black people have a problem.
Of history. And I think the more we can bring to light the reality of this can work to help alleviate some of the frustration that Black Americans have with white people, which I think overall would be beneficial.
It's mainly riding around certain far away from your neighborhood and seeing all white people, and you start to understand that there is more to life than what you have been told. And the fact that you don't know and everybody is just existing, like this is like there's a information and there is class and a certain level of racism that exists in this country that's built upon segregation, that if we don't address that, then not only black people but all underserved people are going to start having real problems, right? Because it's not getting better. Not a situation where we had slavery is over, and now everything is mending and doing good because you personally are doing good within your particular system. If you was ever to scale back and traverse the many different hoods of Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, parts of Florida, and all points in between to LA, Texas, you will see a race of people that are in food deserts, have little to no resources, education, and the list goes on and on and on. So we can imagine that we can do nothing for these people, or we can begin to like have a certain level of compassion for people that's a part of your own race, that we say, slavery happened so long ago and it wasn't no white people back then, but in this day and age there is a large percentage of people that benefit from the fact that we were slaves. And there's also a part of the population that are subsequently traumatized because there are no inheritances, there are no connections to land, there's no connection to history, and there's no reparation or acknowledgement that our ancestors were done wrong and that we have a reverberative effect. And until it gets repaired, then the wound will remain open.
But then the next thing on top of this is it's about time to move on. Like at some point, we have to move on. Like if many Black people spent time focused on bettering themselves and putting themselves in a better situation compared to talking about racism and white people and complaining about the past, many of us would be far better off. That's just the truth.
But if we would be far better off, that's indicating that we are somewhat behind. And if we're going to acknowledge where we are today and not understand the origin of it, it's not to point a finger, it's just to gain some awareness and then try to figure out how we're going to move forward. So it's not going to be anything external that's going to help us. Of course, it's going to be internal, but the idea, right, to pander and act like you got a statistic and therefore that justifies a particular atrocity that, people talk about slavery that, but none of that shit was chattel slavery. None of that shit was converting you to lifelong property, even to the fact that your kids were slaves. This was a whole different level and a whole different game. So, like, this is a perpetual slavery. If we don't acknowledge that perpetual slavery, then guess what is going to remain? Perpetual.
A lot of that mental energy could go to something much more productive for you and your family and society as a whole. Also, just a reminder, I have a free email newsletter.
I got a Substack too. Hit me up, the Hood Mystic on Substack. If you like videos like this, be sure to like the video, share the video to somebody who might be in love with a Becky. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed already. This is just a reaction to a man named Jeffrey Mead, who is saying that only 1% of white men were slaveholders. So we might as well just forget it and move on and act like it never happened. So for those that agree with Jeffrey Mead, be sure to like the video, leave a comment, and let me know I agree with Jeffrey Mead, just so I can put you on one of those lists. All right, so peace to the tribe, peace to the collective. I will see y'all all on the flip side. Peace.